Ah, yes, here we are once again. The conversation of remakes. Are remakes worth it? Are remakes a actual new brand new game brought to life? I really do think that a lot of these remakes have been, necessary and actually brought life to the old games that we love. I really enjoy the remake of Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3 as well. I've really been enjoying all of these new remakes, even the whole Final Fantasy 7 remake that I've been playing as well. It's all been a whole new thing into this kind of ecosystem of gaming, and now we're coming to a whole thing about should this new Resident Evil 5 be remade. IGN just made a very controversial statement about what they think about what's going on with the Resident Evil 5, and should it even be the next installment into the Resident Evil remake franchise. Now, I'm not really opposed to the remakes when it comes to the Resident Evil 1. They have been really amazing. They've been really fun. The Resident Evil 4 did a lot of justice in my opinion, and actually brought a lot of nostalgia into the game, even adding their own type of elements and telling the story in the same way, yet, adding more kind of newer gameplay mechanics that were actually very, very fun to play with and very useful throughout the whole entire gameplay. But with Resident Evil 5, it being kind of the whole, next gen 360 releases, I wonder if we're getting a little bit carried away. These are the kind of conversations that are happening right now, but we're going to get into the video of what IGN thinks about the whole Resident Evil franchise and kind of pick apart a little bit of their opinion, what's going on. So let's get into it.
With Resident Evil 4's release last year, Capcom's project to remake the glory years of its survival horror series is complete. But as the game's post-credit scene suggests, the remakes aren't over. And so the big question is, where next? The obvious answer is a remake of Resident Evil 5. But
Resident Evil 5 was one of those games that I picked up when I was younger on the 360, and it was actually really, really fun. I enjoyed the whole, experience of it all. Even the Chris Redfield himself as the main guy in the game, and I really, really enjoyed it. Even after playing Resident Evil 4, like I think Leon and Chris had very different kind of characteristics of themselves that still even brought them to light, and I really enjoyed Chris Redfield and really, became a fan of it.
On the game's 15th anniversary, it's clear that moving forward chronologically will take Capcom's remakes into the series' weakest era, an era of gameplay and narrative decisions best left in the past. Resident Evil 5 simply can't be remade, at least not to the standards of Capcom's best work.
No, it definitely can be remade. I don't know if Capcom is going to decide to make this the remake or make Code Veronica, because a lot of people are fans of that one. I did not play it myself, but to have a remake of that one would be nice as well. But they can definitely remake this game.
And so the answer is not to remake, but to rewrite. Resident Evil is a survival horror series. Not that you'd know that playing Resident Evil 5. Sure, it features a constant flow of horrific imagery, but Resident Evil 5 is an action game through and through. That's evident in its cover shooter mechanics, vehicle chases with on-rails turret sequences, and the constant rattle of assault rifles. Even its visual design evokes the sandy shades of modern military games that experienced mass popularity in the late 2000s. It all speaks to a series.
The gameplay was really good. Like I remember feeling like there was moments where it got tense. There was moments where it was kind of goofy at times, but it added to the gameplay experience. Resident Evil was not meant to be taken as serious. Freaking what would happen in an actual if somebody got taken over by a freaking virus or anything. Like it's not supposed to be exact or a replication of that, but it definitely was a really good game
That had lost its way. Rather than reflect on the tenets that were the foundation of its experience, Resident Evil 5 looked to the contemporary gaming zeitgeist in an attempt to find a new lease of life. The result is an unholy hybrid of Resident Evil, Gears of War, and Call of Duty. It's as ugly and unwieldy as it sounds.
Wow, this guy definitely did not have a good time playing RE5. He is already going into it. Let's get into it.
This design appears to not just be a misguided attempt to follow Western successes, but also a misreading of its predecessor. With Resident Evil 4, director Shinji Mikami deftly reinvented the series through the use of a new over-the-shoulder camera angle. The perspective allowed for a more kinetic, action-heavy game. Despite this,
RE4 was just a shift in gaming, right? It just brought to life a whole new experience, especially it coming on the GameCube, and also Leon S. Kennedy being a freaking badass. Like, it just brought everything to life. and it's such a good game. Action, horror, adventure, finding treasures, everything like that. This game was kind of, in regards, at least in my opinion, one of the best games I've ever played so far. Like RE4 is still, even the original, after even the remake, the original is still hands down one of the best games ever. Like hands down.
Army never lost sight of the terror at the core of Resident Evil. Through the use of enemies that were strategically placed to provide undulating waves of tension and fear, and the inclusion of Ashley as your vulnerable charge, combat encounters were focused on surviving overwhelming horrors rather than dominating foes. Resident Evil 5, meanwhile, presents its enemies as waves to be gunned down with increasingly powerful weaponry. Their purpose is cannon fodder, a wall of meat to slow your progress through levels. And those levels are not—
Wait, what? What? Let's go back. Wait a second. What?
Increasingly powerful. Your vulnerable charge, combat encounters were focused on surviving overwhelming horrors rather than dominating foes. Resident Evil 5, meanwhile, presents its enemies as waves to be gunned down with increasingly powerful weaponry. Their purpose is cannon fodder, a wall of meat to slow your progress through levels. And those—
How is there any difference between the RE4 and RE5? They're just zombies, right? At the end of the day, regardless of, like, I can't exactly remember what RE5 and what was going on, but it had to do with the whole freaking virus happening, right? I don't know exactly the whole storyline behind it, but I wouldn't say it's just you just grinding away. They're just obstacles for you to not get to your point. There was like a whole storyline involving it all, just as much as RE4 had, you know.
Those levels are not locations to be explored. Instead, they are largely funnels that push you from entrance to exit. Resident Evil 4 may have replaced the series' traditional continuous structure with discrete levels in an attempt to move away from the backtracking-heavy design of previous games, but it preserved the spirit of locations like the Raccoon City police station. The village, Salazar's castle, and the island feature interlocking explorable pathways that solidify these locations as authentic spaces rather than obstacle courses. Resident Evil 5 has no interest in this, with the majority of its stages being little more than corridors peppered with dead ends to hide treasures in. Their lack of authenticity means no one will ever mention the Kijuju Autonomous Zone in the same breath as the Spencer Mansion.
Bro, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? I do remember a lot of this kind of, if he's saying that they weren't as memorable as an RE4 environment, I have to disagree with that. A lot of this whole, even though it was definitely in areas that were a little like more mundane and not as colorful, but even in RE4 there was parts that felt like not as alive, right, per se, but it still was something that is rememberable, and I can remember to this day enjoying myself through it out.
All this is to say that a faithful remake of Resident Evil 5 would break Capcom's 7-year streak of brilliant survival horror games. It's telling that the series' reset point, Resident Evil 7, was a reinvention of the very first game, a haunted house that grew ever larger as you unlocked new rooms by solving its puzzles. Clever reinventions of this base conceit is the key to Resident Evil's success, be that dropping an unstoppable force into the house's corridors, such as Resident Evil 2's Mr. X, or expanding the scope of the house. Resident Evil Village's titular location is effectively a giant manor. Its corridors are streets, and its rooms are houses. Resident Evil 5's stage-driven structure is simply inferior to this design. A modern recreation of it would only further highlight its flaws, especially coming in such close proximity to
Why does this guy have such a dislike against RE5? Like, I don't understand that. What does he dislike? So it doesn't. It has the whole formula of what an RE game is, right? It has zombies. It has a protagonist. It has an antagonist. It has a teammate. Not an Ashley thing where you have to just chug her along with you. It has somebody who's actually combating with you. You had 2-player story mode with it. Like, there was a bunch of things added to the game. It had if I can remember correctly, but it even had the quick equip shit that was going on that we have today. You know, what are you talking about?
masterclasses like the remake of Resident Evil 2. Remakes can, of course, completely redefine the structure of their source material. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, for example, is recognisably an updated version of the classic RPG, but its world design and gameplay mechanics are a world apart from the 1997 original, and so you could argue that Resident Evil 5 is actually the Resident Evil most in need of a remake. A whole new environmental structure and scenario design that reins in the action and dials up the horror would bring it in line with Capcom's other remakes. But all of this doesn't account for Resident Evil 5's most notorious problem: racism.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so, oh my god, what is this video? Are you freaking kidding me, bro? What are you talking about? This is an insane way to say. This is an insane. You got to be kidding me. Oh my god, bro. Is this really one of your driving points as to why RE5 cannot be remade? Because all the other reasons he had, it didn't really. Who gives a shit? Like, they can even add on to it. They can, yeah, you can rewrite or whatever. Like, it doesn't need to be necessarily rewritten. Or as far as the atmosphere that was given to you, like, you can't even have. He's already prejudging the game before it even comes out. But finally, we got to the freaking meat and potatoes of it all. The reason this game cannot come out is because it would be racist. It would be racist if RE5 was made today. Let's hear his idiotic. Let's hear his idiotic reasons why it's racist.
Set in a fictional West African country, Resident Evil 5's primary antagonists are black people. Yes, it's technically the Ouroboros virus that protagonist Chris Redfield is fighting, but the parasite's host is depicted as a nation of mobs and primitives who are violent even before their infection. Intentionally or not, Resident Evil 5 positions Africa as the Dark Continent, an uncivilized world harboring a diseased population that needs gunning down via Western intervention in the name of global security. This insensitive treatment of people of color was hotly debated even as early as Resident Evil 5's debut trailer, with writers such as Ngai Kroll and Stephen Totilo pointing out the game's—
Bro, when I was younger, right? When I was younger and I played this game, it's funny enough, never did I ever think that this game was racist or hated black people or why are we kidding black people. It was part of the storyline, part of the setting that they were in. Look at, I know everybody's going to use this talking point, but look at even Resident Evil 4 being in the setting that it was, gunning down Hispanics or gunning down people who were Spanish, right? It was just the setting that it was brought into, right? It had nothing to do with these guys are racist or the environments being created around this. Even look at this, the Spaniards. I don't know where exactly it was, but the Spaniards had dilapidated areas and houses and all things like that. Why didn't could we say the same thing about that? And it's regarded as one of the best games of all time, at least in my opinion. But like, what are you talking about? How? It's just the setting that it's in. It has nothing to. Even as a kid playing this game, I never thought that. Wow, man, I'm shooting all these like it doesn't even make sense.
Uncomfortable post-colonial imagery. The arguments and think pieces continued well into the game's release window, with IGN's own former editor-in-chief Hilary Goldstein having also wrestled with the subject. But that was 2009, a time when race was apparently a debate rather than a reality. In the 2020s, in a post-Black Lives Matter world, there is only one acceptable response to a white man shooting waves of Africans for an entire video game: no.
What are you talking, IGN? Why would you? First of all, IGN, why do you have? Okay, I get this woke agenda, and we're trying to get. Listen, I'm not a hoe against wokeism, right? I'm not against it. I understand it. I understand a lot of kind of the perceptions that people have, the younger perceptions that are actually, some of it is good, some of it is too radical at the same time. But why would IGN? Well, he already prefaced it because they had this kind of opinion beforehand, so it only makes sense that somebody who has this kind of point of view would even be putting out a video like this in the first place, or even being allowed to put a video out like this in the first place. I just don't understand. I get it that we're in a woke area, timeline right now, whatever. But at the end of the day, what are we talking about here? We're making a problem out of nothing. The reality is this is the setting of the game. It has nothing to do whether we're coming into they're using things that maybe culturally were around there in Africa. I don't know, right? But they have to have references of what's going on. They wanted to create a world around it. Look at RE4, right, with the Spaniards. Look at the kind of the house and the structures and the other all these things that were used to kind of build the whole environment around it. Like what exactly are you talking about here?
There's one thing I do. I have a job to do, and I'm gonna see it through.
Remakes may be able to redefine their source material, but there's only so many changes you can make until it's not a remake at all, but an entirely new game. And if you take Africa out of Resident Evil 5, is it Resident Evil 5 anymore? Even with a vastly improved, more sensitive take on the continent, perhaps one with a black protagonist and a more empathetic look at the outbreak, the experience would simply be too divorced from the original to hold the name Resident Evil 5. So where does Capcom go now? Personally, I'd look back.
This guy has no evidence behind what the game would be written as. This guy doesn't have the evidence of how the gameplay or how they're gonna reconstruct the entire thing, or even if they're gonna reconstruct the thing. He has no evidence besides if they're even gonna remake number 5. Like, this guy is just making a problem out of nothing. He's just creating an issue.
Backwards. Code Veronica is an ideal candidate, as is the original Resident Evil. But if the only way is chronologically forward, then a total rewrite of what comes next is the logical path. Because what followed Resident Evil 4 was not one terrible game, but 2. Resident Evil 6 doubled down, no, tripled down, on the action-packed, set-piece heavy shooter design, to the extent that much
A lot of people did not like RE6. I did. I just remember playing these games and oh my god, I'm about to play. Who remembers freaking waiting for Leon to meet Chris Redfield? Especially like after playing the freaking last 2 games. That was one of the best moments I felt. Even adding the third character, you know. Or remember Ashley coming back to kind of see, like, everybody reuniting with each other. RE6, I know a lot of people did not like the gameplay. I love the gameplay. I love the mechanics. I think you could even, I forgot what you could do, but there was a bunch of stuff. It was more action oriented, kind of the fluidity of the game as well. Like, a lot of people hated RE6. I really loved it.
Much of it could be mistaken for a third-person Call of Duty spin-off were it not for the monsters. Its restrictive level design practically puts you in a chokehold, forcing you to endure a barrage of bombastic moments that have no interest in evoking any sense of fear. Resident Evil 6 is a survival horror, only in that it's a horrible game that you have to survive playing.
This guy's an idiot. This guy is just like a RE1, RE2 freaking this guy is like I feel like this guy loves the older version of the games, and he likes kind of the more horror aspects rather than the action of it. And it's kind of what you fall in line, and when it comes to that, what you would prefer. But at the end of the day, these games, as far as them being a horror or whatever, like, for me, I really enjoy them. They had horror elements, had action elements into it. Like, it kind of had a lot of it kind of, you know, making the DNA of it all.
But this time around, it doesn't have to be like that. Capcom now has the opportunity to ignore the past and completely reinvent this chunk of the timeline. In Resident Evil 4 Remake's post-credit scene, evil mastermind Albert Wesker details his plans for world domination to Ada Wong. Reflected in his glasses is an image of Excella Gione and the Stairway of the Sun, 2 significant plot elements from Resident Evil 5, which indicates Capcom's intentions. But there's more to consider. This scene is largely a replication of the sequence from Assignment Ada, a non-canon chapter from the original Resident Evil 4. Its shift from unofficial to canon points to a willingness to change. Furthermore, the end of this scene is completely rewritten. When learning of Wesker's plans, rather than dutifully deliver the stolen Las Plagas sample to him, Ada betrays her shadowy boss and forces her helicopter to turn around. In this moment, the future of Resident Evil becomes unclear. Capcom has given itself the freedom to do whatever it wants. I just hope it's not a remake of Resident Evil 5.
This guy is crazy. I don't know what this guy is thinking. I don't know why this even has to be a take. Why he even made this. Like, I get the whole wokeism. Look, here we go. As a native Nigerian, you already really gotta stop being offended for us. As an African, the fact that IGN proofread this and released it as well, stop being offended on our behalf. Exactly. The fact that this was approved by IGN, but it makes sense because he prefaced this. He prefaced one of his points with them having the same type of ideas in 2009, so it makes sense that this would be approved. But at the end of the day, like, what the hell? Like, you're making a problem out of nothing. It's just crazy. But you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion, and that's kind of how it goes. But we'll just end up having to see what Capcom ends up deciding. I'm sure they're gonna do. It's not gonna be 4. It might be Code Veronica or something crazy. We'll see. So yeah, man, that has to be it. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about this whole thing. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button. Obviously, always subscribe if you can. I would really appreciate it.